The recruiter said I was a statistical inevitability. She smiled when she said it. Like it was flattering. You are always going to work here, she explained. The model identified you in 2021. It was 2026. I had applied to the company in 2021. In fact, I'd never applied to them at all. The company was called Helix Dynamics, a behavioral analytics firm contracted by major corporations to optimize executive recruitment. Their systems, according to their website, were built using adaptive machine learning methodologies influenced by research from Stanford University and large-scale data modeling infrastructure similar to frameworks developed by Google. Translation: they harvested patterns, and they had harvested mine. I'm a product strategist, mid-level, competent, not remarkable. When the Helix recruiter reached out on LinkedIn, I assumed it was routine headhunting. Your decision-making architecture aligns unusually well with our executive predictive grid, she wrote. I almost deleted it. Then I saw the salary. Double my current compensation, full remote flexibility, equity package. I agreed to an exploratory interview. The first interview wasn't an interview. It was a conversation with an AI avatar named Myra, neutral voice. Minimal facial expression. She asked open-ended questions. Tell me about a professional failure. How do you handle ethical ambiguity? Describe your internal dialogue under pressure. It felt more like therapy than recruitment. At the end, she said, your cognitive emotional symmetry score is within optimal leadership variance. I laughed. Is that good? Yes, she said simply. 2 days later, I received an offer letter. No second round, no panel interviews, no reference checks, just a contract. The recruiter explained, our predictive retention model assigns you a 94% long-term alignment probability based on one conversation. She tilted her head slightly. Not just that. On my first day, I received access to the internal profile archive. Most employees never saw it, but as part of my onboarding, I was granted transparency privileges. Under my name was a timeline, scrolling back 5 years. Data points, behavioral indicators, sentiment analyses. They had been modeling me long before I knew they existed. How did you collect this? I asked my manager. Ria, public data, she said calmly. Your conference talks, your Medium articles, your podcast interviews, even your Slack tone patterns from previous companies that used our enterprise suite. I stared at her. My old company used Helix software, she nodded. For productivity analytics, I remembered vague HR emails about performance optimization tools. I hadn't thought twice. They had scraped email cadence, frequency response, latency during conflict threads, lexical shifts under deadline pressure, social media, emotional polarity trends, even Spotify listening changes during high-stress weeks, all anonymized initially, Ria said. Until pattern convergence exceeded 87% identity certainty. Identity certainty. You're very consistent. It didn't feel like a compliment. The system had predicted I would leave my previous company within 18 months. It was correct. It had predicted I would decline to lower-tier offers before accepting a mission-driven firm. Correct again. It had even projected the month I would experience career dissatisfaction spike. That month aligned with my breakup, which I had never posted about. But my posting frequency dropped. My language became terse. The model noticed. Why me? I asked. You're conflict-averse but principle-driven, Ria said. You seek moral coherence in corporate environments. That's rare. I felt exposed. Like someone had read my journal. We need leaders who believe they're making ethical decisions, she added. Believe? She smiled faintly. Belief drives performance. 3 weeks into the job, I noticed something unsettling. My calendar began auto-populating with meetings before I accepted them. The system predicted I would agree and scheduled accordingly. Most of the time, I did accept it was efficient. Until it wasn't. One Friday evening, I received a calendar invite labeled Strategic Narrative Realignment Discussion. I hadn't requested it. Rhea hadn't mentioned it, but when I entered the conference room, the team was already seated. As predicted, someone muttered jokingly, the project involved reframing public messaging around a controversial data monetization initiative. Essentially, selling anonymized behavioral prediction services to insurance firms. Something about it felt wrong. It's ethically murky, I said during the meeting. The room grew quiet. Rhea glanced at her tablet. Your profile suggests initial resistance followed by pragmatic accommodation, she said. I'm sorry. You tend to object early, but align once broader context is presented. She tapped her screen. A graph appeared on the wall display. My past decision arcs, moments where I voiced concern, then complied. She wasn't guessing. She had data. I'm not an algorithm, I said sharply. No, she agreed. But you are statistically consistent, the meeting continued. I stayed silent, but something inside me shifted. If they could predict my resistance, they could design persuasion around it. And if persuasion was personalized, was my consent real? That night, I reviewed my internal profile again. New entries had been added. Subject exhibits cognitive dissonance under ethical pressure. Likelihood of exit increases if value misalignment persists beyond 6 weeks. The system was modeling my potential resignation in real time. Anticipating it, perhaps preparing countermeasures. The next week, HR scheduled a values integration session, optional. But my attendance probability was listed at 88%. I skipped it. Within an hour, Rhea messaged me. Unexpected deviation. Everything okay? Deviation? Not disagreement. Deviation. I began testing the system, responded to emails unpredictably, changed my writing style deliberately, used slang I never used before, paused before replying to messages I'd normally answer instantly. The dashboard reflected it. Behavioral volatility increasing, predictive reliability declining. It felt good, like reclaiming randomness, but it also triggered concern. Rhea called me into her office. We've noticed destabilization in your engagement pattern, she said gently. Are you unhappy? I'm human, I replied. She studied me. You were happier when you followed your natural trajectory. You mean when I behaved predictably? When I behaved authentically, as defined by 5 years of data aggregation. The final straw came during a quarterly strategy summit. Executives presented a new initiative, predictive hiring for government agencies, law enforcement, public administration, pre-screening candidates based on psychological drift indicators. The room applauded. I felt cold. You're shaping who gets power, I said quietly. We're optimizing leadership, someone corrected. Based on patterns you define, based on data, and data defines character. Silence. Then Rhea spoke softly. You were predicted to raise this concern. Laughter. Not cruel, just amused, as if my objection were part of the script. I realized then, they hadn't hired me despite my moral tension. They hired me because of it. Diverse cognitive archetypes improve strategic optics. Having someone who questions decisions creates internal legitimacy. And when that person eventually aligns, it strengthens consensus. I wasn't there to resist. I was there to legitimize. That night, I accessed my profile one last time. Projected career arc, Phase 1. Enthusiastic integration, Phase 2. Ethical tension, Phase 3. Reconciliation, and advocacy, Phase 3 scheduled within 3 months. I closed the laptop, resigned the next morning. Rhea didn't look surprised. Your exit probability crossed threshold yesterday, she said calmly. So you knew. We anticipated. Did you try to stop it? She paused. Intervention modeling suggested allowing natural departure would preserve brand narrative. Even my resignation had been factored into their strategy. It's been 6 months. I work for a small nonprofit now. Lower pay, fewer predictive dashboards. But sometimes I catch myself wondering, are they still modeling me? Public posts, panel discussions, career trajectory, data persists, patterns persist. And somewhere, perhaps, another recruiter is waiting for my dissatisfaction spike. Because here's what I learned. When companies study you long enough, they don't just predict your choices. They shape the environments where those choices feel inevitable. And the scariest part isn't being watched. It's being understood so precisely that your future feels pre-written. I got the perfect job because they built it around the version of me their algorithm expected. But I left, not because they were wrong about who I was, but because I needed to prove they couldn't calculate who I might become.